But let's look at some old photos, see if I can notice something that's out of the blue. What the? That's so green. What's up guys, Dylan Fulmer here, and today I'm going to be teaching you 5 tips that you need to know in order to create phenomenal photos. As a reminder, in order to get the most out of these tips, take your photos in RAW, not JPEG. Tip number 1, add an S-curve or tone curve to your photo. When you bring a photo into the develop portion of Lightroom, scroll down until you see the tone curve section. You'll notice that there is a tone curve for red, green, and blue. That's because every photo is made up of a combination of red, green, and blue pixels. You're going to add an S-curve to each of those colors. Watching me do this, you might be thinking, Dylan, that looks awful. And you'd be right. This is because you need to add a tone curve to the R, G, and B, or red, green, and blue. From my experience, adding the S-curve simultaneously adjusts the contrast, brightness, and saturation of the image, and I find that pretty helpful. I used to say to myself, Dylan, you can just increase the saturation and the contrast. While you can do that, adding the S-curves really makes the photo pop. It's a route to adjust the brightness, saturation, and contrast all at one time. Take a look at this photo of cookies. This one currently just has the saturation and contrast increased. Now, look at the cookies with the S-curves added. The S-curves in the R, G, and B. See the difference? I do. Moving right along to tip number 2, pay attention to the white balance. Unless you're going for a dramatic effect, images that are green, magenta, too warm, or too cool do not look natural. Having the right settings in your camera really helps you have an easier time editing the photos in post. However, if you forget or mess it up, most photo editing applications give you the opportunity to tweak it to your liking. Now, I use Adobe Lightroom, but I imagine other photo editing services might have something similar to this tool. You can use the white balance correction tool. You click the widest part of the image and it automatically adjusts the white balance for you. It's not perfect, but I found that it's pretty helpful, and in most cases, it works really well. Tip number 3, crop your photos. You could have a photo that looks fantastic, but if it's improperly cropped, it's going to be a little distracting. When cropping photos, you want to pay attention to the rule of thirds. For example, take a look at this photo of an exterior light. It currently sits on 2 of the 4 intersections of the grid. It looks nice. However, if I were to move the light into the very left side of the grid, it would look very boring. It's slightly obscure and it makes me want to cringe. Here is a photo of a few corn kernels on top of a wooden table. Because we have the corn kernels and a space in between 2 of the boards, we don't really know what we want to look at or focus on. I'll start off by cropping the photo, make it a 5x7. That already looks loads better. The corn kernel meets an intersection of the grid, so our eyes are drawn to it. I'll then add an S-curve, adjust the highlights, shadows, blacks and whites. Fantastic. This photo has come a long way from where I started. My final adjustment will be to change the white balance, and with this being an image taken outside, I want it to be slightly warm, as if to give off the vibe that sunlight is dancing on the table. Now that is a good photo. Tip number 4, take a break. Depending on how many photos you're editing, you could be sitting there at the computer for a long time, and eventually you'll lose the ability to notice white balance issues with your eyes. Stand up, do some jumping jacks or some other stupid exercise, and then sit back down again. Maybe go get some water. Well, let's look at some old photos, see if I can notice something that's out of the blue. What the? That's so green. Now, this is an example of incorrectly applying the S-curve. Come to find out, I didn't even add an S-curve to the blue channel at all. Just by adding that small change, the photo looks a lot better. Do you see what happens when you don't take a break? It doesn't have to be a prolonged experience, but I find that the longer I edit photos for, the less ability I have to use the white balance setting in my eyes. Moving on to my 5th and final tip, which is be consistent. If you're editing a photo shoot for a client with photos taken at the same time and place, you're going to want to have the same feel and look to all your photos. You just want to make sure that the photos look relatively the same. If you're using Lightroom, there's a really nifty tool that you can use to help you stay consistent with your photo edits. Go to Settings, then click Copy Settings. This will pull the settings of the photo you're currently editing so you can apply it to other photos. Now, go to a different photo and click Paste Settings. Even with this, you want to make sure that you check the highlights and shadows after applying the paste settings, as some of your photos in the mix could have different exposures during the shoot. You'll want to double check that. So that's it guys, thank you so much for watching. If you found these tips helpful, make sure you leave a comment below telling me which one was your favorite and why. Be sure to check out my video, What Does a Beginner Photographer Use? I don't know if it's in this corner or that corner, can't remember. I'll just say both. It's gonna be one of these corners. If you wanna see more like this, make sure you like and share this video. See you next time. You know, there's just something really nice about putting a lens in the camera body, the click. It's a really nice sound. It's really satisfying. That was a good sound too. You ready? Let's do that one more time. Ooh. Ooh. It hits just right. That sound is like getting a back scratch in a really hard to reach place, or you get it scratched and it's just like, ooh, this is a good day. That's just nice. If you stuck around, kudos to you, because here is my bonus tip. Don't delete in camera. Some of you might be thinking, Dylan, that has nothing to do with photo editing. It doesn't? Well, if you deleted all the photos from your camera, would you have any to edit? I don't think so. The reason I include this tip is because it's what I would tell my younger self just getting into photography. Because sometimes I would look through photos on my LCD, you don't get a good idea of what the image actually looks like. And if you're shooting in RAW, the possibilities are endless. As I was saying, if you look at the photo on the LCD, it's a really small screen, so you don't get a good idea of what the image actually looks like. And even if on the screen it looks like an awful photo, there's a chance it could be great after you're done editing it. So do not delete in camera.